Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We've just opened the webinar, so we're just going to wait for a couple of minutes just to allow people to join us before we get started. Okay, it's just 3 minutes past, so we'll make a start. We have a busy agenda this afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. You're very welcome to this Blue Economy Cluster Builder event on innovating in the blue economy, the challenges and opportunities for SMEs. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jennifer Fox. I am the Program Manager for the Blue Economy Cluster Builder Program. And so I'm just going to give you a very brief introduction to our event this afternoon and to the Blue Economy Cluster Builder. And I think we'll start by just running through some quick housekeeping for this afternoon's event. So next slide, please. I'm sure you're all very familiar with this, these kind of online events at this stage and working in the Zoom platform. So your microphone is automatically muted, your camera is automatically disabled. We do have a Q&A function available and we do encourage you to ask questions there. We have some time at the end of our session this afternoon for a Q&A. So I encourage you, as our speakers go through their presentations, please add your questions into the Q&A function. There is a separate chat function to add any thoughts or comments on the presentations from your own perspectives as we go through. So I encourage you to use that as well. In just making sure that you have a good connection, it's a good idea to shut down any non-essential applications. And just to let you know that the webinar is being recorded this afternoon, just so that you are aware of that. We would ask that you don't take photographs, screenshots, or recordings of the webinar. The recording will be made available and we will make the slides available to you as well. Obviously, we expect you to act responsibly and we will challenge anything less, although I don't think that that will be a problem this afternoon. Okay, next slide, please. So as I said, I work as the manager for the Blue Economy Cluster Builder program, and I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes giving you a brief introduction to that. So we'll crack on to the next slide, please. Just to start by introducing this afternoon's event. So as I mentioned, we're talking all about innovation within the Blue Economy. The Blue Economy Cluster Builder has a focus on small and medium enterprises, and innovation, I think, is a really interesting topic within the work that small and medium companies in Scotland do. The aim of today's event is primarily to firstly introduce you to the Blue Economy Cluster Builder, although I am sure that many of you are quite familiar with us at this stage, but just for the purpose of anyone who maybe isn't as familiar with the Blue Economy Cluster Builder, to give you that brief introduction. And then, as the title says, and as our speakers are going to go into in more detail, to review the challenges and opportunities of innovating in the blue economy in Scotland, and to provide a forum for some discussion around how those challenges and opportunities can be optimized. Next slide, please. So we've got some fantastic speakers, as you'll have seen in some of our marketing around today's event. We've got Sara Holland from Potter Clarkson, who's going to be our first speaker. Then we have Elaine Jameson from Highlands and Islands Enterprise. We have Amanda Ingram from Zero Waste Scotland. And then finally, we've got Lindsay Dunbar from iBioIC and the Bioeconomy Cluster Builder. And as I mentioned, we do have some time at the end of this afternoon session for Q&A and a bit of a panel discussion with our speakers. So please do keep that in mind as we go through our presentations this afternoon. And it's great to get your comment or questions, I should say, for the speakers, but also we're happy to take comments and perspective and views as well on the presentations. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so just to start from the very beginning. So I usually like to just kick off with a definition of the blue economy. It's a term I think a lot of people are more and more familiar with these days, but essentially just to set us all off on the same path, we consider the blue economy to be all economic activities related to oceans, seas and coasts, covering a wide range of interlinked, established and emerging sectors. And I think this second definition here, which comes from the World Bank, is an important one as well, and one that we like to carry as part of the Blue Economy Cluster Builder program, which is that the blue economy is the sustainable use of ocean resources. And I think more and more that's an absolutely fundamental part of any economic activity related to our oceans, seas and coasts, is that sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth, looking at livelihoods, jobs, as well as and alongside ocean ecosystem health. Okay, next slide, please. So the overview of the Blue Economy Cluster Builder. So as I said, hopefully some of you are quite familiar with this, but Scottish Enterprise has put together a whole stream of these different cluster builder programs. You'll hear from Lindsay a little bit later on, who's involved in the Bioeconomy Cluster Builder. There's another one for sustainable mobility and the rail sector and various different parts of the economy in Scotland, and we are looking specifically at the blue economy. So essentially the aim of the programme is to communicate and raise awareness around the benefits of the blue economy for Scottish SMEs, enabling them to take advantage of new opportunities, and ultimately hoping that the work that we do within this programme will increase the number of Scottish companies that operate within the blue economy and support the growth of the blue economy as a whole in Scotland. Next slide, please. So how we are doing that through this funded period of 3 years that we're working on the Blue Economy Cluster Builder, we have a program of 3 main tasks, although there's a lot within each of those tasks. So the first task is all around building a sustainable Scottish Blue Economy cluster and raising awareness of the Scottish SMEs Blue Economy capabilities. So essentially that involves bringing people together, getting to know the capabilities within small and medium enterprises that are working in the blue economy in Scotland, providing networking opportunities and forums for discussion around some of the common challenges and opportunities that exist for those companies working in the blue economy. The second task is all about events just like this. So creating opportunities again for that kind of discussion and information sharing, knowledge transfer around topics that we see as being of interest and of common need to the SMEs that we engage with. And then the final task is around providing market intelligence for SMEs. So again, through tasks 1 and 2, we gather a lot of information from SMEs as to what the key challenges and opportunities are for them in the work that they do in the blue economy and where their ambitions are for growth, if there's other industries or sectors that they would like to be moving into or growing into, and then we can provide a service to them around market intelligence and information sharing. So next slide, please. As you'll all know, when we talk about the blue economy, it's such a huge and nebulous kind of area, particularly in Scotland, where coastal activities, anything to do with our seas and coastlines, is so important. And I just wanted to put some of these icons in to demonstrate some of the industries that we refer to when we talk about blue economy. These are, I think, in order of number of jobs in Scotland. So kind of trying to demonstrate what the key big players are in terms of the blue economy in Scotland. But I have another slide, which I haven't added in here, which has about 10 times the number of icons, which just goes to demonstrate the variety and the diversity that exists in terms of different sectors and the work that goes on in relation to the blue economy. Next slide, please. And just to demonstrate, I talked a little bit about some of the tasks that we undertake as part of the Cluster Builder program. And again, hopefully some of you will be familiar with this already, but some of the kind of basic things that we do on a regular basis, we have a really fantastic website which has a page around our community. So there's a simple form that you can fill in and fill in the details of your company or your organization, and it gets displayed like a profile on there. It's absolutely free to do that. And you can provide us with your logo and a couple of images around the work that you do. And it's a really good way to find other companies. You can search it by sector, and you can find lots of different companies that have signed up and see a little bit of information about those companies, such as the kind of work that they do, the sectors that they're interested in, and as well as their contact information and links to their web pages and social media and things like that. So I'd encourage you to do that if you haven't done it already. We also have a monthly bulletin, which has lots of information about funding opportunities, events that are coming up, both from ourselves and others, as well as news and press releases from all of the different industries within the blue economy in Scotland. So again, there's always a huge amount going on around the blue economy. What we try and do on a monthly basis is just pick the kind of the most interesting bits of that, or the kind of the biggest funding opportunities, the biggest opportunities that we see that might be of interest to the SMEs that have engaged with us. So again, it's really simple to sign up for the bulletin. That's just a link on our website as well. And as I mentioned, we do some regular market intelligence reporting and signposting to relevant information and knowledge sharing and things like that. So all of those links are on our website as well. So I'd encourage you to have a look there, and I'll pop a link to the website in the chat. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, that's everything that I have just to introduce you to the Blue Economy Cluster Builder and to introduce you to the aim of this afternoon's event. And so with that, I'll pass over to our first speaker, who is Sara Holland from Potter Clarkson.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to speak to you all today. So, sorry, next slide. Just a little bit about my background. So I was a postdoc for 8 years at the University of Nottingham. And my research was all in molecular biology. So I'm very much coming at, I guess, the blue economy and all the work I do from a biotechnology, biology point of view. But I do appreciate that the blue economy is much broader than that. So I apologize if I accidentally slip into a biotech focus with some of what I talk about, but I'll try not to. Next slide, please. So my aims of this talk is to kind of, I think I find a lot of startups, SMEs, they don't really know very much about IP, intellectual property, and they don't really understand how important it is to their business to get off their ground and then for their continued success. So I do quite a lot of IP educational talk. So what I'm hoping to do with this talk is quickly go over what is IP, because you all will have got IP, whether you think you have or not. Some of the benefits associated with protecting your IP, and then some of the barriers that I see, basically exploiting your IP and even recognizing the IP in the first place. So it's kind of more fundamental than just the IP. It's actually getting the technology working and out into the world in the first place. Then if I've got some time, I'll whiz through some key points that I find people don't tend to know or misunderstand about. I am a patent attorney, so I'll focus on patents. So some key information about patents. Next slide, please. So intellectual property basically covers anything that you kind of create with your mind. So I'm a patent attorney. I focus on patents, and patents protect the inventive, clever aspect of your technology. So I'll come on to this in a bit, but to get a patent granted, you have to have something new and it has to be inventive. So there's the clever how something works element there. You can also protect the shape and appearance of things, which are important in some businesses. So you do that with designs. There are registered and unregistered designs. So that's very much how things look. It's not how it works. That's the patent part. So it's kind of complementary protection for different things. Trademarks are very important to most businesses, but more important to certain businesses, especially if you're client facing. And trademarks are all associated with your brand. So it's your logo, your get up. It can even be things like sounds or in some cases smells that are associated with your branding. So especially I'm seeing a lot in the alternative protein space and your cultured meat type technology, branding is really important. Confidential information, that's also a type of intellectual property, and we can break that down into things like know-how. So that's some things that you wouldn't necessarily publish or you wouldn't put in a patent application. It's just how you do something, but it ends up being critical to how your process or your method works. Trade secrets are a particular part of confidential information that has to fulfill certain criteria. So for something to be considered to be a trade secret, it has to be confidential. You have to have taken steps to keep it confidential, and it has to have value because it's confidential. So the UK trade secret law is quite, I think it was recently updated, and it's quite powerful. So trade secrets are one way of protecting your technology. Whether you want to go for the trade secret route or not will depend on how the likelihood of your technology actually getting made public in the first place. So if you're a company where you've got a lot of employees coming backwards and forwards, might not be the best way forward. Or if you're selling a product and the key components of your product can be easily reverse engineered, then as soon as you made it public, people can copy it. So in that case, you want to go for patent protection. So patents and trade secrets complement each other quite well. Then there are other IP rights, such as copyright, which people have heard of, rights in databases, and all sorts of things. So if you think about your business, you will have got some IP somewhere, whether it's simply the confidential information that you've got. It could be price lists, customer lists. So that's all confidential information that has a value. Next slide, please. So to protect your IPs, I'm going to focus more on patents at the moment, but the same applies to things like trademarks and designs, although they do tend to be a bit cheaper. So if we talk about patents, protecting your technology with a patent, it can be expensive, or rather it is expensive, especially as time goes on and the costs increase. So why do you want to bother doing this? So a patent gives you the right to stop people working your invention. It doesn't automatically give you the right to do it yourself, and that's something that we'll talk about in a bit, called freedom to operate. So I might have got a patent that protects a certain product, but somebody else might have got a patent that protects features within that product, so they overlap. So I couldn't make my product without taking a license from this third party. So at least I've protected my space. That's my space. You're going to need to have some sort of IP strategy, patent applications in the pipeline to get funding, especially from VCs. So if somebody's going to give you a load of money to develop your technology, and again, thinking about biotech, it can take quite a while. Maybe some other technology areas, it's much more faster moving. But they're going to give you a load of money to develop your technology. Once that's ready to go on the market, they're going to want to know that you can stop people from copying you. You don't want to have done all the hard work for Joe Blogs to come along, copy your technology and make a load of money, and then your investors don't get their money back. So to raise investment, they're going to want to know you've got your IP strategy in place. You need to think about this long term. So I know at the start, a lot of companies and founders will apply for grant funding. So you might think you don't necessarily need to think about IP in terms of grant funding, because you just apply for it and hopefully get it. But if you think a bit longer term, at some point, you're probably going to want to go for a VC, venture capital funding, for your Series A or Series B. And that's when they're going to want to see that you've got your IP in place. So a lot of companies might make the mistake of thinking, I don't need to bother about my IP. I can publish it, can tell people what I'm doing, but then that will stop you protecting your technology later on, because as I said at the beginning, to get a patent granted, your technology has got to be new and inventive. And if you years ago told everybody about it because you didn't think it mattered, you can't correct that later. You're kind of screwed. It's probably, especially as you're starting up, your most valuable asset. So if you think about what you've got as a company, say you're a founder or you're co-founding a company, you've got your ideas, you've got some enthusiasm, you've probably not really got much in the way of capital goods. So you've not got premises, you've not got big bits of kit. You might be borrowing things from different companies or working with places like the IBIOIC. So you haven't got anything really physically tangible, but what you have got is your idea, and that is going to be your most valuable thing. If you can get it written down in an IP strategy, that's what's going to raise you the money to get your business going. And as I said, if you make a mistake early on, it kind of very, very negative long-term consequences because you can't go back and fix it. Once you've disclosed your invention, it's tough, it's gone. Next slide, please. So this is a report covering Europe, made by the European Patent Office a couple of years ago, I think it was, or last year. And this looked at the registered rights. So because trade secrets and confidential information are confidential, obviously nobody knows what you've got, so we're not including those in this. But in terms of patents, trademarks and designs that you register, so there's a database of who's got what, they found that 98%, they found that SMEs, which had a patent, a design and a trademark, had 98% higher revenue per employee than companies that didn't have any rights. If a company just had just one of those rights, so they just had a patent, they still had 68% higher revenue. But then the surprising thing was, actually 91% of the SMEs in this report didn't actually have any IP rights registered. And one of the things that the report put this down to is just simply a lack of education about IP and the importance it can play in your business. So that's one of the reasons I kind of like doing these talks. And I also, part of that also comes from being in academia so long, coming out of university at 33 and not having known anything about IP or commercializing research. So I know there's a lot of people out there who don't know anything about it, who really need to know at least something, because just a little bit of knowledge really helps. So, and then just one of our clients, they're an antibody therapeutic client. They haven't got a product on the market yet, but so they've not got anything to sell yet, but they were recently acquired for over $2 billion. And that was simply because they've got 2 patent families. So all their value was tied up in their IP, which was worth a lot of money to somebody. So it is important to think about it. Next slide, please. So now I've talked a little bit about the benefits of protecting your IP. I'll just talk what I think are the barriers. So like I just said, I think there's just quite a big lack of understanding of IP in its basic form. What I remember when I was in the lab, I'd get a result and I'd think, oh, somebody's probably done it before. And that's as far as I'd go. And I think that's where a lot of people go to, especially with patents. Oh, somebody's done it before. But now I'm a patent attorney, I know that's it's not as clear cut as that. So I think if people knew a little bit more about what it means to be new, what it means to be inventive, they can look at their own data and their own business and identify things that could be protectable in their business and be very valuable. So I think there's this fundamental lack of understanding of what the IP requirements are. Then I think we've got a lot of, if you're an SME or a founder, you've got so many different things to do. You've got to be HR, you've got to be finance, you've got to be IP, you've got to actually do your science and do your research and build your products. So, IP is probably not high up there on your priorities, because if you don't know enough about IP, then why would it be a priority when you've got actual people on the ground needing to be paid? You need to hire people, you need to sort out your finances. So I think there's a bit of ambivalence. Oh, IP will sort it later, when actually it really needs to be the core of your business. It needs to really support your business plan. So you need an IP strategy that builds in whether you're going for patents, trademarks, trade secrets, what your trademark's going to be, when you're going to file different things, what data you're going to get and when you're going to get it. That all needs putting together an IP strategy that supports your business plan, so you can get from where you are now to where you want to be. And then one thing that I'm quite into, I suppose, from a background. And it comes to the more fundamental lack of getting all this good stuff that we're doing in this country out into the world is this block at universities. So can I go on to the next slide, please? So I know in the universities there are lots of people doing really good research that could change the world, it can be really groundbreaking. But I know a lot of these people aren't thinking in the kind of commercial way, because I was guilty of doing the same, and I know people do, it's just what you do. You're focused on getting your paper, addressing the aims of your grant. You're very kind of narrowly focused on interpreting your results in a certain way. They don't take the time to think, okay, this result shows X, but actually in another context, it could be used to do Y. It's got a commercial application. Is that interesting? Do we want to look at that? There's a lot of that just doesn't happen so much. So, and also, even if it did, people are still very obviously focused on publishing in Nature, hopefully. So the vast majority of the good stuff that's being done in the universities just goes straight into journals. Once it's been published, you can't patent it. So it's kind of almost a dead end. What does get as far as the tech transfer office tends to go into kind of a very slow moving black hole. The University Tech Transfer Office decides whether to go for it or not. So they might try and protect it. They might not. A big chunk of those will get dropped at some point. So the patents will be abandoned. Some will be licensed out. A much smaller proportion, I think, gets spun out into companies that are, so these are companies that are coming out of the university using the IP that's been generated while somebody's been working at the university. So I think we need this. So to me, there's 2 points here where people need educating. So the scientists in the labs, they need to know what to look for and what to do when they find something. And then this kind of getting it out of the university at the other end needs sorting out. I think it's a lot of SMEs and industry are put off working with universities just because the whole process is very slow. It can take months to get agreements sorted out. So that's just my thoughts on things that could be improved in universities. So if I've got just a couple more minutes, can I go on to the next slide? So I just really want to quickly whiz through some key patent information that I think you should know if you're in a technology area where patents might be important. So patents protect something with a technical feature. You can protect products, methods. You can, in the biotech space, you can protect proteins, DNAs, microbial strains. You can protect chemicals, you can protect new drugs. You can protect software if it does something technical. It's got to be new and it's got to be inventive over, and this is over anything that's been published before you file your application. So it's very important to keep it confidential. That's the main thing you need to take home from this. If you're thinking ever of patenting anything, keep it confidential until you've got an application on file. Once you've filed it, it's fine, you can talk about it. So it doesn't need to delay downstream things. You don't need to wait until it's granted. Next slide, please. So just in terms of the everything that can count against your invention before it's published, before you file an application, this means for academics, poster presentations, conference talks, journal articles, things on websites, blogs, your PhD thesis, that you can get that embargoed. And it can include even copies of the Beano, which in this case disclosed a picture of a doggy doorbell, which was cited in a examination report against a patent application in the UK. So literally can be anything that the examiner can find. So all of these, this is what we call the prior art, and that can be used by the examiner to say your invention isn't new or invented because the Beano talked about a doggy doorbell years ago. Next slide, please. So I said an invention's got to be new and it's also got to be inventive. So a lot of the time when you're working in kind of technical areas, you need to take a step back and try and think, although it's obvious to me because I did it, it was an obvious route for me to take to find this new clever thing. Is it obvious to what in the patent world we call the skilled person? So a skilled person is somebody who doesn't really think outside the box. They can follow instructions. If you give them a journal article, they can follow the methods in it, but they won't think, oh, what if I try this? for them to go and try something else, there has to be a clear teaching in that document to say, it would be a good idea to mix this with this to get whatever. So when you are trying to think, have you got something patentable on your hands, you need to just try and think, I think it's really obvious, but perhaps it's not in the patent world. There are some things that I work on that to me seem so obvious, but when you look at the actual documents that's out there, there is no teaching to get there. So don't just dismiss something because you think it's obvious. Next slide, please. So in a patent application, you also have to make sure your invention is sufficiently disclosed. So this means you've got to have enough stuff in there so that the skilled person, again, can come along, take your patent application and repeat your invention. So that's kind of, can be quite straightforward in certain technologies. In some, especially in biotech, you're going to need some data, variations around different sequences for proteins and nucleic acids, really useful. And a key thing, because I know a lot of people, maybe not on this call, but in biotech and industrial biotech, are using new microbial strains. Depending on how that was made, you might need to deposit that at a national depository, strain depository, before you file an application. Otherwise, your application will not be classed as sufficiently disclosed. I think I'm probably running out of time. Next slide, please.
Yeah, just 2 minutes, Sarah, please.
Yeah, okay. So the data you need to support a patent application does not need to be amazing or anything like the quality you'd need to get into a journal. As long as it shows the effect that you're saying it shows. It can be a rubbish gel, like this was from my PhD thesis years ago, would not be accepted in a journal article, but it would be fine for a patent application. So the data just has to make the invention plausible. So if you've got an effect and you've got a rationale for a particular effect, as long as you've got a bit of data to support that that's likely to happen, then that's enough. Next slide. Next slide, please. I'll just go on to the next one. So one final point, IP ownership is very important, and issues around who owns the IP can put investors off quite a lot, because they don't want to give you a load of money and then 5 years later it turns out actually all that IP belongs to somebody else. So the inventor of a patent is somebody who makes the technical material contribution. They're the inventor. Ownership originally resides with the inventor, but under UK law, if the inventor is employed by somebody, then that IP automatically belongs to the employer. So there can be all sorts of issues with universities, with different students and postdocs, etc., being on different contracts, employment contracts. But basically, that's how it goes. Inventor owns it, but then it's automatically owned by the employer. So if you're working in collaboration with anybody, you need to make sure you've got all these kind of things sorted out before you collaborate, because if two people collaborate and find something amazing, that's when the problems are going to start. If you're not got sorted out who's going to own the IP associated with that work early on. And then I'll finish there. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Sarah. And I think you're totally right. It's an area that we as SMEs don't really know a lot about, certainly speaking from my own experience, and as you've highlighted there, is so vital and can be so vital to so much of the work that happens in SMEs and in academia, particularly around innovation. So thank you for that. And one of the things that was occurring to me as you were speaking there was, when you were talking about in academia, how the focus is so much on publications, and that's what kind of marks out your success as an academic. But then once something is published, it's, it can't be protected and it can't really get picked up commercially, potentially, if all of the information is out there. And I think you kind of explained it there at the end, but I was wondering if there's an opportunity for private organizations or companies to pick things up that have been published in an academic context and take those forward in a commercial context, and how the kind of patent law works around that. Yeah,
so I think if something's been published, you can't patent protect it as it is. But a lot of, and it's same for everything, a lot of patentable subject matter is just an incremental change on something that's already there. So that's the whole point of publishing your research, that people can take it and develop it. So the companies can take something that's been published and then work on it and modify it to get something that could be new and inventive. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. We'll move on to our next speaker, but if you do have any questions for Sarah, pop them in the chat, and as I say, we'll have some time at the end to come back around to questions. So I'll hand over to Elaine.
Good afternoon, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sounds good.
That's super. Next slide, please. My name is Elaine Jamieson, as it says here. I'm head of the Blue Economy, Food and Drink, and very shortly Life Sciences at Highlands and Islands Enterprise. And I'm here today with my colleague Christine, who joined me about a month ago to help deliver a specific project, Green Offshore Tech. Now, I should say I'm working in an open space today. I'm sort of between meetings and travel. So if there's too much background noise at all, then please let me know and Christine can take over the presentation. Next slide, please. So, as an enterprise agency, Highlands and Islands Enterprise support a wide range of businesses with a wide range of challenges and opportunities. And we do a lot of work with SMEs in innovation. But I'm not going to speak to you today about our wider range of support services. I'm going to speak very specifically about one project we're involved in at the moment that has a current call for proposals open. And that is a project called Green Offshore Tech. So what's this all about? It's a cross-border and cross-sector project that aims to encourage and support innovation in SMEs to develop sustainable blue economy industries by applying new and novel technologies. So we want to turn good ideas into business, as it says here. We want to create new industrial value chains by reinventing existing industrial value chains through cross-sector and cross-border collaboration, and importantly, new technology transfer. We'll do this by supporting business projects that seek to develop sustainable products, processes, or services. And in turn, this will support regional development and create new jobs and growth in sustainable industries. And as an enterprise agency in Scotland, that's what we want to see. Our aim is, therefore, to make offshore production and transport cleaner, greener, and more sustainable. Next slide, please. So just to give you a little bit of a background to the project, and I should say I'll go through this at a fairly high level, so if you want any more detail after this webinar, please come back to us. But this project is a cluster-driven INSUP 2020 innovation support project, and we have 5.25 million euros from the European Commission to deliver this. So we have 12 project partners, and you can see the countries highlighted in light blue here. So that's Norway, Iceland, UK, Scotland specifically, Latvia, Poland, Portugal, and Germany. And we span 16 regions across these countries. The consortium brings together a breadth of experience, not only in economic development, but also research and innovation from across Europe. And I think it's fair to say that we come from countries who are global leaders in the key sectors which we're focusing on in this project. So I think it's reasonable to say we have world-leading expertise, not only in the sectors, but also in the enabling technologies and the circular economy. So we're really pleased to have the opportunity to be part of this project and very keen that we get Scottish businesses involved. Next slide, please. Just a quick list and some icons here that show you the organisations involved in the project. They're listed here by country and by specialist area. You know, there's a lot of people involved here. I would emphasise, though, that there's no wrong door into this project. As a consortium, you know, we're very collaborative and well connected, and we want to help you, the Scottish business base, connect with some of these partners. Next slide, please. So this slide shows you the framework structure of this cluster facilitated project. So firstly, we have analysed specific challenges and problems and the need for cross-cutting and enabling technologies in 4 key offshore industry sectors. And secondly, we've established a business environment consisting of systematic approaches, methodologies and tools that enable cross-sectoral collaboration. So we have 3 million euros to support SMEs and 8 business support services. And we hope we'll support about 100 businesses and 100 projects through 2 calls for proposals. And as I said at the very beginning, the first one is open now and will close on the 6th of July. The next call for proposals will be open later this year. Next slide, please. So you can see the 4 sectors here that I referred to earlier. So we have offshore wind energy, offshore aquaculture, offshore oil and gas, and waterborne transport. So there's a few things I should say about this. You have to, I think I've said it probably enough already, but I want to be really clear. You have to be an SME to participate in this project, and you have to be operating in one of these sectors, and you have to be looking for a solution that comes in one of the fields in the bottom 4 circles on the screen here. So in one of these 4 key enabling technologies. And I think the sectors are fairly self-explanatory, but the enabling technologies maybe less so. So I'll very briefly touch on those. So when we speak about advanced materials, we speak about the development and production of advanced materials and structures designed to function in more exposed environments. So we're calling these offshore environments, but that's not necessarily a distance. It may actually be that the environment is more offshore and more challenging. So of particular interest here are eco-design, corrosion resistant, lightweight, cost-effective, durable solutions that are suitable in these more challenging environments. And these are structures and vessels as well. If we move on to advanced manufacturing and digitalization, we're thinking here about big data, artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things. So we're really looking for digitalization and data technologies that improve working in offshore environments. That could be around inspection, it could be around monitoring, testing for integrity, etc. It could be about robotic or digital solutions that focus on improving operations or perhaps the health and safety of personnel. And of course, satellite technologies for offshore applications and supporting the supply chains are becoming increasingly important. So innovative technologies that increase greater resilience, and of course that is as equally important to our waterborne transport sector as our more fixed infrastructure. We speak about environmental technologies, and there we mean the circular economy of things, so waste prevention, reuse, recycle, recovery. And so, technologies that support the circular economy through value chain from design to decommissioning, that perhaps look at energy efficiency or water efficiency, and that mitigate against the impacts of climate change. And that could include carbon capture and storage technologies. And then finally here we have new energy carriers. So not, I have to say, my area of expertise, but hydrogen, methanol, ammonia, lithium cell, etc. So technologies that support the capture, storage and transportation of new energies to the end users, that help the decarbonisation and modernise our infrastructure and transport fleets, and that actually support the development of complementary onshore infrastructure to support these offshore industries. Next slide, please. Now, I quite like this slide just because I think it gives a feel for how much and the things are changing from the traditional business models that we saw even in the last decade. The pace of change through production, distribution and consumption, with a firm focus on sustainability goals, that piece about reduce, reuse, recycle and recover, I think is becoming a really important feature in all of our lives, and is particularly important for our industries that work in the marine economy. But it's the whole piece about the supply chain, how the supply chain enables and supports the journey to a more sustainable future. I think that's really exciting here. Next slide, please. So Green Offshore Tech will support SMEs directly by creating and enabling open space for cross-sectoral fertilisation, value chain innovation and entrepreneurship. And I think this space is as exciting, or perhaps more exciting, than the grants that are available to support participants in this project. It will bring together public and private sector actors, so industry, knowledge service providers, research institutions, regulators, the public sector, to address common needs, or actually to drive forward our ambitions in a strategic manner. And it fundamentally will encourage and support networking and relationship building and knowledge transfer across supply chains, across industries, and across the countries that are part of the consortium. And ultimately, we hope that will underpin new regional development, the creation of new jobs, and growth in sustainable industries that will actually go well beyond the end of this EU funded project. So we're looking to really starting to get the pendulum to swing here, but by creating this sort of open space for collaboration and information sharing, I think we hope that there will be significant longevity and value for businesses way beyond the time that we are involved in this. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we have a call for proposals for SMEs that's open at the moment. We're eager to hear from businesses actually early on. Don't wait necessarily until you're ready to submit an application. Don't wonder whether this is right for you or not. Have a call. Christine, who's on this meeting with me today, is speaking to a wide range of businesses and is very straight with advice on whether this could be a good project for you, or actually whether there's something else that might be better for you. And of course, being an enterprise agency, we're fairly well sighted on the range of opportunities that are available to support businesses. But I must say, I said it before, but you have to be an SME representing one of the key sectors, and you need to be looking or working in a sector that has one of the 4 enabling technologies. You have to be an SME, as I said, but you can subcontract some of your project to a partner, and this could include a large company. Can we move to the next slide, please? I've included this, I'll not labour it too much, but it gives you a bit of a visual on the call for proposals that's currently open and what happens next. I would say on the website for Green Offshore Tech, you can find out much more information. So there's a guide for applications, an application form and proposal template, and the usual declaration forms that you have to submit, for example, to confirm that you are an SME. And there are some frequently answered question responses in there too. How am I doing for time, Jen?
Yeah, you're okay, Elaine. 2 or 3 more minutes.
Super. Right, I'm going to rush through the next slides. If we could move to the next one, please. They'll be available, I'm sure, after this recording, and you can have a wee look at them in more detail. But this is a bit complicated, but it sort of shows where we are here. We are currently at the very beginning here in the first 3 months where we have the call for proposals, but you can start to see the phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3 funnel. So if you apply to this project, you can see in the blue boxes service 1 to 3 that you would expect to be able to access if they meet your requirements in phase 1, and a wee bit there at the bottom around the funding. And then as you move through the funnel, for the businesses who stay in the project, it starts to show you what's available in phase 2 and what's available in phase 3. And as I said, those blue boxes at the top are about those business support services that I referred to earlier. Next slide, please. Yep, so I think, the business support services I mentioned earlier are actually, from our engagement with businesses, probably more exciting than the cash that is on the table. But these slides just give you a flavour, of the services that are available, and it's all about strengthening those businesses' opportunities, enabling better market access, support to commercialise current and future opportunities through the networks and the people that you meet providing professional advice. Next slide, please. In the interest of time, I won't go through these in detail, but the slides, as I say, I'm sure will be available later, and they start to give you a little bit more information on what's available in each of the business support services. So the Business and Tech Academy, the brokerage and business-to-business matching events, and the access to finance piece. As I've said, we're always available to chat about this in more detail if you'd find that useful. These are the phase 1 business support services. If we move to the next slide. It starts to get into some finer detail in phase 2. So you have one-to-one mentoring and coaching. So that's 3 days of tailored business advice. You get into branding. That's group and individual training on branding. You get support with internationalization. Oops, tripping over my words there. So that's about getting more visible and getting known in more countries or in front of new influential potential customers or partners. And then there's support here for investor pitching, really to help you get those new good ideas or products in front of real private investors. And there will be 2 live investor pitching events where the top 50 winners will be able to present their ideas to investors who are looking to make investments in new and novel and sustainable solutions. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is just a bit of a Gantt chart. I thought it was useful to include this in here so that afterwards you can refer back and have a wee look at the timeline for when you could expect these products and services to be available to you. It's obviously important if you choose to apply to this programme that you have the bandwidth, the capacity within your company to fully participate and make the best of the opportunity that's coming your way. The next slide, please. So this is the web address for our project, and this link specifically would take you to information for the call for proposals. I'd really encourage you to have a look at our website because there's a lot of stuff on there. Next slide, please. Yep, there we go. That shows you where to find more information. Apologies for going through this very quickly. It's quite difficult to cover it off in 15 minutes, but I hope it gives you a really good flavour of what we're trying to achieve in green offshore tech. And if you've got any questions, either raise them today or come to us after today for a chat. Thank you, Jen.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Elaine. Yeah, it sounds like a really fantastic opportunity, and there's so much there, as you say, as well as the cash available on the table. So that's great. Just a quick question that occurred to me as you were speaking there is in relation to the funding that is available. I think there was a figure on the screen of about €60,000 per SME. Is that something that could potentially be provided as match funding for a larger initiative or program that SME is trying to get involved with?
Yeah, potentially. We need to look at everything on a case-by-case basis. And I have to say, this isn't the hardest €60,000 to come by. There's one lump sum payment in phase 1. I think there's 2 payments in phase 2, which I think, if I remember correctly, is worth about €45,000. And I think there's one payment in phase 3. It could be complementary to other funding that you're leveraging in. The other thing I would say is that some businesses will have a fantastic idea that doesn't fit the Green Offshore Tech project. And Christine actually has a dual role within HI. So half of her time is spent working on this project, but the other half of her time is spent working on the blue economy in general. So it means that where we find some absolute diamonds, but they're not a fit for Green Offshore Tech, we can nurture them along to find the right type of support in Scotland or at a UK level.
Fantastic. So the key thing is if we have diamonds to come and speak to you or Christine or the team.
Oh, we love a diamond.
Brilliant.
And you never know what is a diamond until you take a close look.
Exactly. Brilliant. Thanks, Elaine. Okay, we'll move on to our next speaker then. So Amanda, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. So I'm Amanda Ingram. I'm the Bioeconomy Sector Manager at Zero Waste Scotland. I work to support different sectors across the bioeconomy who are involved in the conversion of renewable biological resources into materials like food, feed, materials, energy, and I work to support these sectors in the sort of development and the delivery of new and innovative opportunities that ultimately will reduce emissions, reduce waste arisings, and address inefficiencies in the way we use resources. Next slide, please. So Zero Waste Scotland, we're a not-for-profit environmental organisation. We're funded by the Scottish Government, and we also receive funding from European Structural Funds programme. And we exist to lead Scotland to use products and resources more responsibly, and our focus is particularly on where we can have the biggest or the greatest impact on climate change. Next slide, please. So as Jennifer mentioned earlier, there are many definitions of the blue bioeconomy, and this one is the World Bank's definition, and I think that it very much echoes the ambitions of a circular economy, which is the focus, a focus for Zero Waste Scotland as well. Next slide, please. So essentially at Zero Waste Scotland, we're working with innovators to create a kind of widespread shift in thinking and activity across Scotland, so we can move away from this traditional take, make, dispose model of resource use that we're used to, whereby we've been kind of digging up materials or harvesting them, using them, and often disposing of them at the end of their life. And in many cases, like the kind of green line along the bottom of the screen there, it's kind of a one-way system for resources, and it's creating resource depletion and impacts on our global environment. And we want to move away from that and move towards a more circular economy where we redesign systems and we redesign our products so that our resources can be kind of easily recovered and continuously recovered, so they're then kept in circulation for as long as possible, and also in as high a value as possible. Next slide, please. So we're investing European regional development funds to stimulate innovation and transformational activity to help small and medium-sized businesses to be more resource efficient and also create a more circular economy. We've got a wide range of support available, and I'm not going to go into the detail of that today, but next slide, please, sorry. But I just want to give you a quick kind of idea of the type of support that we have for SMEs and also for large companies as well. We run workshops for businesses who are in the kind of early idea stage to help them kind of formulate that idea into a sort of a viable business model. We provide one-to-one business support from specialists, or sometimes from intern placements, who for those that are ready to kind of adopt or develop a more circular business model. And then for those that are beyond the kind of research and development phase, we have provided significant funding to various projects through our Circular Economy Investment Fund. I believe this fund is currently at capacity, and we're in the process of developing a new fund as well for that. And we also have sector specialists within the organisation who can provide advice. We can help facilitate collaborations, which personally I think is key to being able to progress any innovative opportunity. The connections that can be made. So I should also say I've added some links to the bottom of some of the slides, which should be able to provide a bit more information. Next slide, please. So the majority of projects that I'm involved with are looking at taking a waste or a byproduct from one process and using industrial biotechnology to convert those products into new products and processes. And in relation to the blue bioeconomy, that would include things like developing new ways to grow seaweed, like for example through rope seeding, or combining seaweed production with aquaculture systems, so the seaweed benefits from the nutrients that are kind of often lost from uneaten food and fish poo. And Loch Long Salmon, they've developed Scotland's first semi-closed fish farm system, which allows the capture of that solid waste of uneaten fish food and fish pee, so that fish poo, sorry, so it can be turned into a new resource, and then therefore that would also reduce the loss of those nutrients to the sea. We work with several SMEs on the development of innovative feed ingredients that can offer sustainable alternatives to imported fish feed. There are other companies like Decmar who are repurposing and recycling fishing nets to reduce the waste from that. And other companies are looking at kind of reef ball systems where they use recycled materials to create a kind of underwater structure for the improvement of biodiversity in the oceans. And then finally, there are many companies, but there are other companies like Renewable Parts who we've supported to develop the refurbishment of wind turbine parts, which when they're out of commission or at the end of their use, they are often recycled or have no other purpose. But in this case, they're looking at repurposing them, which will save companies a lot of money and save a lot of resources as well. And that would be hopefully applicable down the line for future offshore wind power as well. So I guess the list could go on, and the diversity of like innovative ideas that are being developed in Scotland is kind of truly fantastic, really. Next slide, please. So I'd say from my personal experience, the biggest challenge that businesses face in their journey in kind of accessing really new markets is probably a limited understanding of the whole value chain that they are part of, and the kind of considerations and the collaborations that they need to make, and possibly even the compromises that they will need to make along the way. It's very similar to some of the points that Sara raised earlier in terms of, having kind of oversight of things in advance rather than, waiting until you're too far down the line to realise. So, it's definitely, I think it's not enough just to have that technical feasibility, and it's not enough to have kind of business viability, and it's not enough to have market desirability. You need to have them all in order to, and you need to understand that value chain that you're a part of. And by the value chain, I mean sort of everything from the design, the idea, the design, to the sourcing of the materials and the feedstock, through to, your research and your development and the production and the market, and then also thinking about the use and the consumption and the end of life, and whether you might be responsible for that product, or at the end of its life, when it's no longer in use. And many of the companies that we speak to, they have amazing ideas. Like, we have a lot of amazing innovative or innovation in Scotland, and I'd say a lot of businesses tend to want to go straight to design and proof of concept, and then only to be kind of held up by finding that somewhere along the chain there are factors that they didn't anticipate, and they can really set them back, I suppose. So that could be things like finding that there's a lack of available feedstock that they kind of assumed that there would be, either because it's already been committed through like long-term contracts, or there might be competition with other innovative companies who have their kind of eye on the same materials. I think Lindsay, who's going to speak after me, is going to discuss a project that we recently worked on, looking at the kind of sharing of a resource between several companies to try and kind of counteract that issue. Also, sometimes the quality of the materials isn't as expected. Sometimes there's contamination with feedstocks, or the location is inconvenient, and sometimes as well it could be a lack of awareness of the regulations that have to be met when you're kind of transporting or storing or using materials. Like, for example, if you wanted to use a waste from one process to make a product, you might need to get an end of waste classification for that material. But if you didn't consider that or know that at the outset, that could really hinder you down the line if you're, then unable to get that classification, and you have to sort of go back to the beginning and rethink your feedstock. So, or if you were creating a food product, all the processes and equipment that you use would obviously have to meet food safety standards. And I've worked with a business who, they installed the kit, they had proven the technology, they had the food material or food grade material, and then they were at last stage kind of discussing potential markets, And then there was a sort of realization that one small part of the kit, like I think it was like a plastic mesh somewhere, had been deemed unsuitable for food production. So it kind of set them right back, you know, to the kind of research and design stage again, because they had to get an alternative solution for that and check that, you know, it didn't affect anything else. So I suppose it's really, what I'm saying is it's really important to be aware of all the parts of the chain as you go, so that your idea and your design is sort of ready for the factors that it may encounter along the way. You know, so don't wait until the end of the process and then look for your markets. You know, look for them and engage with them early on, because it can take a long time to convince a company like a fish food company to substitute what they've used for years for your new alternative. And if they haven't been involved throughout the process, that can be a much harder sell to give them confidence in what you do. I mean, although coming back to Sarah's point earlier, you also have to, you know, be sure that you have protected your you know, IP and protected your product and your ideas. And it can also take a long time to be considered, like in a procurement process. Sometimes procurement processes are very prescriptive, and they may kind of unintentionally rule out your innovation because it simply wasn't known to be an option when they were issuing the tender. So you need to be kind of ready, but also on their radar for when the next opportunity to bid arises, I suppose. And they can also, you know, they can also tell you what they need and what their customers require, so that you have that insight a lot earlier on in order to tailor your product or your service or packaging or whatever it happens to be accordingly, rather than wait till you get to the end and go, well, they won't accept it because I've used the material that they don't want or they can't accommodate. So and that's the same for you know, funders. I think Sarah and Elaine both kind of mentioned that it's important to understand early on what the funders you know, what's important to them and what's the requirement that they have to make sure that your innovation meets their requirements. You know, being able to make the case that your innovation is of equivalent or a better standard or a lower carbon footprint than, you know, what you're looking to replace. And also, again, that, you know, that you have the IP in place and that you can demonstrate that this is innovative. You know, you might have an amazing idea, but you will need to be able to convince the funders and markets that this is a better than the other options that are available. So yeah, but even if you suppose do involve funders and markets early on, there can still be kind of barriers to getting that sort of elusive contract. You know, sometimes you do have to be prepared to compromise or change direction. You know, I've worked with a few companies now who they've developed their innovation and they've got good market interest. They're kind of good to go, really, but they then experience this kind of block where they can't scale up without the contract, and they can't get the contract without having reliable quantities of products. So it kind of becomes, I don't know, a bit catch-22, and that's you know, where you might need to consider collaborating with others or taking a kind of diversion, like, for example, maybe targeting a smaller or a different market in order to build up the business and the product confidence. Next slide, please.
Amanda, just 2 minutes, please.
Okay, I'm just finishing up. So I'm just going to quickly finish up with these 3 quick examples of projects that we've undertaken to reduce some of those challenges. This first one is a report by Zero Waste Scotland. We're about to republish, in fact, and it documents 27 million tonnes of bio-based waste and byproducts that are known to arise in Scotland, and many of those are from the blue economy, from the fish or aquaculture sectors. This documents where they're located, the volumes, the characteristics, and businesses can use the data in that to help identify markets or locate materials for their innovations. So the links are on the slide there. Next slide, please. I just want to briefly mention the Scottish Seafood Park. many fish processors are generating waste and byproducts, which tend to get mixed together and they're sent for fish meal. So there is a market for them, but there are higher markets available if the volumes were significant enough. And individually, a lot of processors, find it difficult to access those markets, but collectively, with larger volumes, that's much more of a possibility. So Opportunity Northeast are leading the development of a business case to co-locate seafood companies in the northeast of Scotland that could enable companies to kind of combine their efforts, share their resources, and hopefully access those larger markets. And we've supported them to identify opportunities to add value and to look at the market interest and what's the sort of order of market readiness to support that project. Next slide, please. I'll skip this one because I know Lindsay's going to cover this one, so just go quickly to the last one. I just want to finish up by flagging up a consultation that's out at the moment. This is seeking views. The Scottish Government are seeking views on their proposals for legislation to develop Scotland's circular economy, and it's an opportunity for you to input into wider plans for a step change in reducing, reusing, recycling materials as part of Scotland's transition. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that if you can. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Amanda. I really like what you were saying about the kind of how important it is to have the technical side of your innovation, but kind of echoing what Sarah was saying a bit earlier, that there's lots of other elements that need to be kind of developed at the same time, markets and supply chains and the production side of things. So thank you for that. So in the interest of time, we'll move on to our final speaker, who is Lindsay. So Lindsay, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks very much for the introduction, Jen. Let me just share my screen with everyone.
Sure.
So hopefully you can all see that, and I'll go into presentation mode.
Yeah, looks good.
Perfect. So thank you very much for inviting me to come along and speak today. I'll try not to keep you all here too long, so I know we're a wee bit over time. So today I'm going to talk around collaborative approaches for innovative projects. I'm one of the senior business engagement managers at the Industrial Biotechnology Innovation Centre. And among other things in my role, I work very closely with my colleague Kim Cameron on the Bioeconomy Cluster Builder, which I'll talk a little bit more about today. So I wasn't too sure of my audience today, so I thought I'd just give a little bit of background first, and then I'd talk a little bit about the Innovation Centre, what it is we do, how we support innovation, and then I'd finish off by just talking about a couple of case studies I thought you might find quite interesting. So firstly, what is biotechnology? It really is a key enabling technology that can be used across a wide range of sectors, so it's not a sector in itself, and it really underpins a greener means of manufacturing things like chemicals, consumer goods, pharmaceuticals, including things like vaccines and antibiotics. And you can do this in a few different ways. Firstly, by utilising things that are maybe waste material, so for example taking black bin bag waste and turning that into something like biojet fuel, or taking biomass. So marine biomass is a fantastic example, and I'll talk a little bit around a case study around that later on. And also through engineering biology, so through strain and cell development, you can also manipulate how we would manufacture things to do it in a more greener, more sustainable way. So I think people hear the word biotechnology and they just think life and chemical sciences, but it's a lot wider than that. And this just gives you a bit of a flavour for some of the sectors that we cover. And at the Innovation Centre, we've got sector specialists similar to Zero Waste Scotland, people who have knowledge in specific areas. And all of these can be made using various types of materials, but again, marine biomass is a fantastic use of feedstocks that could be used for things like medicines and manufacturing, also into the food and drink market as well, and other things like bioplastics and as an alternative to packaging. So lots that can be done in that area. So again, I wasn't too sure how much the audience would know about the Industrial Biotechnology Innovation Centre, or IBioIC for short. We're a networking and support organisation that was set up in 2014 to stimulate the growth of biotechnology in Scotland and also just the wider bioeconomy. So we're publicly funded by Highlands and Islands Enterprise and Scottish Enterprise and the Scottish Funding Council. And what we're really here to do is bring together industry, academia and government. And we provide support to ease the innovation journeys of companies of all sizes. We're a networking organisation, a member organisation, so we've got over 140 member companies, ranging from really early stage, like small, micro, even spin-out companies, all the way up to your large multinationals such as Unilever and Procter & Gamble, Croda, those types of companies. We're here to help companies get their products out into the global market. So we kind of came to fruition from the National Plan for Industrial Biotechnology. And this is a document that was published in 2013, and it came out of Chemical Sciences Scotland. And in 2013, there was only 43 companies who were active in industrial biotechnology, with an estimated turnover of just shy of 190 million. And in that original document, they set a target for 2025, and that was to have 200 companies active in industrial biotechnology and an estimated turnover of over 900 million. So every couple of years, this document is updated. And actually, last week we launched it at our annual conference. It was launched by Minister Ivan McKee. And in our most recent update, we found that we're doing quite well on the road to achieving these figures. So there's 147 companies that are actively involved in industrial biotechnology with a turnover just shy of 800 million. So what we decided to do was add some new stretch targets in. So that was to have more companies, a higher turnover, 1.2 billion by 2025, having direct employment of over 4,000, and also a GVA contribution of 360 million. So we're very much behind driving a lot of this, a lot of the development in the industrial biotechnology space in Scotland. So how are we doing this? So there's a few different ways, and I'm going to talk around our support and what we can do to help companies in their innovation journey. One of them is through skills. So we offer skills programs ranging from HND all the way up to PhD. And we've welcomed just shy of 370 students through our programs since our inception in 2014. And we also fund projects. So we funded 121 innovative collaborations that bring industry and academia together. And I'll touch on our funding a little bit because it might be of interest to the audience. And so far to date, we've supported 207 companies on their innovation journey. So directly, we've invested just shy of £20 million in IB activities, including things like facilities, access to equipment, network building, and educational programs. And through our funding, we've directly invested £6.4 million into innovative collaborations. And from that, we've managed to leverage £28.5 million to drive forward industrial biotechnology in Scotland. So I've mentioned we offer funding. We've got different funding mechanisms depending where companies are on their innovation journey. So firstly, our most popular funding is Feasibility Funding, and that's up to £20,000. And then we also do spin-out funding, which is a fairly new one for us. And again, that's £20,000. And then a slightly larger pot that we've got is innovation funding. That's open at the moment, so that's £100,000, and that's open until the 1st of September. And we also have recently introduced a facilities access fund, which is usually £5,000, but we can do larger projects all the way up to £10,000 through that, and that allows companies to access facilities at higher education institutes across Scotland, so it doesn't have to necessarily be our facilities. We also offer technical expertise to our technical team and advice, and we've also got a scientific and a commercial advisory board who can help companies and help advise them. We're quite unique as well in that we have access to facilities. We have 2 scale-up facilities. One is FlexBio, and that's based at Heriot-Watt University, and that's very much there to help companies who are looking to scale up. So it helps their upstream and downstream processing, and we can do fermentation up to 30 litres there. And then we've also got Rapid Bio, which is based at Strathclyde University, which is our host university. And it is more benchtop scale. It's kind of screening and selection of cells. And it's a 2 litre is what we offer at that facility. Also networking, I mentioned earlier that we're a networking organisation with a membership of over 140. And we put on networking events for our members. So we have member socials. Also, we just last week, as I mentioned, hosted our annual conference, which brings together, it was about 400 people registered to attend our conference. So it's a really good networking opportunity for the industrial biotechnology space and the wider bioeconomy in Scotland. And finally, I've already mentioned our skills programme ranging from MSc all the way up to PhD. We also offer continuous professional development as well for companies. So I also mentioned that I work on the Bioeconomy Cluster Builder, which is a sister cluster builder of the Blue Economy one. And similarly, we're a 3-year ERDF funded collaboration, and it's between ourselves at the Industrial Biotechnology Innovation Centre, Innovate UK KTN, and Scottish Enterprise. And we're really here to help raise awareness of the benefits and application of industrial biotechnology. And we do this through a few different ways. So similarly to what we're doing today through the Blue Economy Cluster Builder, we run targeted workshops and awareness raising activities. And we do workshops in kind of more traditional industrial biotechnology spaces and feedstocks such as marine and whiskey co-products, but we also try and do some outreach into some new sectors. So ones that we've done recently are in things like construction and textiles, which has been really interesting, and definitely we're getting quite a lot of traction in that area. But what we also do, and it's just from feedback from our SMEs, is we offer kind of useful support type activities as well. So for example, earlier on the year we had an investor pitching sessions where we put out an EOI and companies submitted their expression of interest. We selected companies to go in front of investors, and those investors included the Scottish Investment Bank, BASF Capital, and BP Ventures and Archangel, and that worked really well. And we'd be looking to have something similar, I think maybe later on this year, early next year. And another thing that's becoming increasingly important to companies is life cycle analysis and carbon accounting. So we ran a workshop in that in February, and it was really well attended, and companies have found that really useful because it's becoming more and more important for companies to understand their carbon assessment when they go for funding. So that's something we've been working with companies on. Amanda mentioned the bioresource mapping tool. So we host that at iBioIC. So my colleague Kim looks after that. So if anyone wants to have any inquiries on the bioresources available in Scotland, then we can look at that for you. And we also provide direct innovation support through the Innovation Centre, but we can also help signpost SMEs to funding opportunities as well. So I just wanted to finish off by giving a couple of case studies. So one really good example of a collaborative project that we've done with the Blue Bioeconomy Cluster Builder is one with a company called Sescon Decom. And what they do is they provide a range of environmentally responsible decommissioning services, and that includes the onshore dismantlement of offshore assets. And as part of their decommissioning, it involves the removal of marine growth, so things like mussels, seaweed, corals that are attached to submerged infrastructure. And as it currently stands, marine growth is either just sent to landfill or it's given to farmers as a fertilizer. And these are fairly low value uses for the marine growth. So Sescon are really interested in exploring higher value uses. So ourselves at the Bioeconomy Cluster Builder project, together with the Blue Economy Cluster Builder, we formed a joint marine forum that was developed, and that includes companies, academics with interest in this space, also associations like the Oil and Gas Association, and Sescon joined the forum, and they developed a project collaboratively with Abertay University called the Characterization and Extraction of Valuable Components from Marine Growth. And this project was funded by our iBioIC Feasibility Funding. And the project's addressing two key elements. So to characterize the nutritional composition of marine growth, and also to assess the feasibility of extracting valuable components from the marine growth for use for things such as animal feeds and supplementation. So that project has just kicked off, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it progresses. And Sescon have also started collaborating with Aberdeen University as well. And what they're looking to do is to secure funding to map marine growth, which is attached to offshore infrastructure around Scotland. And the Oil and Gas Association have a decommissioning schedule. So the project would be really helpful to help for Sescon to understand and develop a methodology for predicting the profile of marine growth that will arise from each of the decommissioning So unfortunately, SESCON couldn't join the call today, but the project lead for this is Karen Seath, and Karen had asked me to share her email address with everyone today. So if you've got any interest in the project, or if you'd like to find out a little bit more, then please do get in contact with Karen or ourselves equally at the iBioIC. We're more than happy to talk to you further about that. And then Amanda mentioned this project. We've been working on it collaboratively with Zero Waste Scotland, the Scottish Whisky Research Institute, and 3 of our member companies. And I know it's not focused so much on the blue economy, but it is an interesting case study and something that could potentially be applied to the blue economy. And that is, we looked at distillery co-products. So whisky co-products include things like draft, pot ale, spent lees, and carbon dioxide. And we do a lot of work, particularly in draft and pot ale, and we're starting to do more work on carbon dioxide as well. And many distilleries, they either have anaerobic digestion facilities on site, or they send their co-products for processing, maybe at an external anaerobic digestion site, or they just send it to landfill or hand it over to farmers just to use directly as animal feed. And while that is a use for the co-products, there are more novel, higher value uses that we could undertake with whisky co-products. So we developed a project called the Serial Utilisation of Whisky Co-products, which was co-funded by Zero Waste Scotland. And during this project, it came to fruition because ourselves at the Industrial Biotechnology Innovation Centre happened to notice that most companies utilising whisky co-products only really extract one component. So, for example, taking pot ale, maybe companies are interested in just the protein fraction or the carbohydrate fraction, and to them the rest is considered a waste stream. So the rationale behind the proposed project was to identify synergies, potential synergies between technologies, and whether it's possible to extract multiple components from one feedstock to be used across a wide range of technologies. So the end result would be multiple end products and also a reduction in waste. So we identified 3 potentially complementary technologies from companies who had an interest in different components. And these companies included Horizon Proteins, Biopower Technologies, and MyAlgae. So Horizon Proteins are interested in pot ale, and they extract the protein fraction to produce fish feed. And MyAlgae are also interested in pot ale, but they're more interested in the carbohydrate fraction for algal growth, which they then extract the omega-3, and that goes into the aquaculture industry. And then finally, Biopower Technologies are interested in draft as opposed to pot ale, but they take the draft and turn it into material that burns efficiently as a gas, or they can use it in bakery products. And to produce their material, they mill the draft down, and it has to be less than 50 microns. And if it's over that, then it's too large and it doesn't pass their quality control. So therefore, any draft that's over this size, they would consider it a waste. So what we explored was this material and whether it could be used to enhance either both the Horizon or MyAlgae process. And we've just concluded this project, and the project findings were launched last week at a fringe event at the iBioIC conference just before it all started. And I've included a link to the findings there, and also Amanda and our colleagues at Zero Waste Scotland have also done a really fantastic video case study, so I do urge you all to check it out. But the findings from our report were really that it is possible for Horizon and MyAlgae to extract these 2 different fractions, so extract the protein and carbohydrate fraction and still produce their end product. And Biopower Technology draft could potentially be used to enhance the Horizon Proteins process. So this has all been done at our Flex Bio facility, so it's very much a kind of pilot scale trial, and the next steps would be looking at additional follow-on funding to bring that up to a larger scale it up, and see if it'd be feasible at commercial scale. So that's the next steps for that. But as I said, this is really exciting for us as an innovation centre, because it's just our first go at this project, this kind of serial utilisation cascade approach. So we'd be interested in exploring whether or not this could be feasible for other potential feedstocks. So feedstocks in the blue economy would be of interest to us. So if anyone has any projects that they think, or any sort of ideas for cascade projects, then please do get in touch with us. We'd be interested in exploring that further. I'm just conscious of time, so I'm just finishing up here. I've got a couple of things I just wanted to promote. So next week, next Thursday, is our next Bioeconomy Cluster Builder event, and it's a digital marketing event for, it says Bioeconomy SMEs, but I feel like it'd be quite useful for any SMEs, and it's in person at the Technology Innovation Centre at Strathclyde University, and it's a workshop where we're going to explore digital marketing. I know SMEs often can't afford to have a full marketing team, or often haven't thought about how they're going to market their product because they're quite early stage. So this will explore that with one of our companies called Wyoming Interactive, who work very closely with a lot of life sciences companies in this area. So if yourself or anyone you know would be interested in this, then please do come along. I've got a link there to the Bioeconomy Cluster Builder website. And finally, I've got quite an exciting announcement. For the first time ever, Scotland is hosting a Bioeconomy Week, and it's taking place the 3rd to the 7th of October this year. So if you'd like to find out more about that and keep up to date with information as this develops, then I've included a link below in my slide there. So apologies, I probably ran over a little bit, but thank you very much for your time and happy to take any questions.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Great to hear that there's so much going on. Yeah, I think there's a huge amount of information there, and I presume you can find out more on your own website or on the through the Bioeconomy Cluster Builder. So I'm really conscious of time, and I don't want to keep everybody over our allocated time. There's just one final thing that I wanted to do, which is to plug the next event of the Blue Economy Cluster Builder. Thanks, Rona, for sharing that. And while you're doing that, there was one question in the chat that I didn't want to not go through. It was for Sarah. Sarah, I wonder if you can mention some actions that that you find relevant to raise awareness of SMEs about the importance of IP.
Hello, sorry, I'm here. Some actions that you find relevant to raise awareness. I don't know. So I suppose if you mean just like telling people about IP and that they should care about it, I guess these kind of presentations and seminars, going out and meeting with investors and finding out what kind of things they're looking for in your IP. Is that the kind of thing you mean, or is it something else?
Yeah, I think so. I think you mentioned coming along to things like this, which is a good opportunity, and then I suppose there's always ways that folks can get in touch with you directly if they're interested in that kind of thing.
Yeah, like I said, I do a lot of kind of IP awareness, education stuff, because basically just because I know what it's like to not know anything. So yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Good stuff. Thank you. Okay, so as you're seeing on the screen, we do have an event coming up next week on Thursday, which is all about investment in the blue economy. So as we've been speaking about innovation today, we wanted to have a focus on the money side of things next week. And we've got some fantastic speakers who you can see on the screen there, some experts in this area who can really shed some light on this topic and give you some tips and tricks as to how to go about looking for investment and sourcing investment for all of the innovation and ideas that you might have as an SME. So I'll just, the link is in the chat. I'm just hitting enter on that. So it's in the chat just now. Please do go and register for that event if it's of interest to you, or feel free to share it with your colleagues if you think it might be of interest to them. So apologies that we've gone slightly over on our time. I hope that you found today's event interesting. Thank you to all of our speakers. I certainly found that really, really interesting and such a wealth of information. And hopefully you've found some of those opportunities, particularly funding opportunities and business support opportunity. There's a lot there. So I would encourage you to get in touch with us, and we can put you in touch with any of our speakers today if there's areas that you're interested in finding out a little bit more information. So thank you all very much. Great to have you with us this afternoon. I hope to see you next week at our event on Thursday. And with that, I'll close the event for today. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.